You see this? I hate this. Plastic bottles and styrofoam trays. I'm sorry, you were laughing. Okay. You see this? I hate this. Plastic bottles and styrofoam trays are a threat to our planet and its beauty. Recycling is a great idea, don't get me wrong. Yet this creative person has come up with a fantastic way to limit the use of hazardous waste and bad materials that will destroy our earth and our environment. Debby Lee Cohen. She is on a mission to save the environment. Her amazing animations have entertained and educated us for years. Here's a sample. Debby Lee, what do you mean by transdisciplinary artist?
Well, I've never been able to make a decision and choose just one thing to do my whole life. So basically, I've taken all the things that I love and I'm passionate about, and accidentally, after 30 years, they've all merged and come together. So I've worked in the theater for many years. I've worked in production as an art director and a designer. I've worked as a painter. I love design, and I love how design can transform the world. Recently, because of a comment that my 7-year-old daughter made, my whole life was changed, and I became aware of the amount of garbage that was produced in New York City public school cafeterias. I had already been thinking about climate change and how design could relate to climate change and how we could tell the story a little bit better so that more people, and in particular younger people, teenagers, tweens, would understand what climate change is all about. And then my daughter made this comment about her trays, and suddenly my whole life changed. And I took these years of experience in design, in theater, in storytelling, in animation, and I applied that to making sustainable change in New York City schools.
Well, are there any materials that you don't use now, that you stay away from, that are easier to use than other ones?
Well, I became obsessed with getting rid of what's commonly called styrofoam. It's actually expanded polystyrene, but nobody knows it by that name. Now, Mayor Bloomberg and the head of Department of Sanitation in New York City, they all call it plastic foam. But most people like to say styrofoam, but it's really expanded polystyrene. We'll say plastic foam for now because Dow Chemical owns the trademark to styrofoam, and they don't like us to use that word. So I became obsessed with getting rid of plastic foams out of New York City schools. And the reason why is because we use 860,000 styrofoam trays per day in New York City schools. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. Yeah, I brought some with me because what most people don't understand is that different than a tray that's maybe a reusable tray, you put another plate on top of it, students actually eat directly off of these trays, and they eat hot, acidic food. Some kids...
Ooh, I remember when I did that when I was a little kid, like the hot lunch.
Right.
And scraping the trays.
Scraping the trays. Remember the sound? I mean, it's fun. There's something really actually pleasurable about scraping into foam, drawing into foam, and you see kids do it all the time. And in fact, Kids still they eat with sporks mostly in New York City schools, and which is like a spoon and a fork combined. And you often see after all the spaghetti is eaten that somebody will draw into their tray. And as an artist, I think, how wonderful. As a mom, and as somebody who's concerned about the environment and health, I'm horrified when I see that, because some child's scraping and then they put the spork into their mouth, and we actually don't know whether they're ingesting polystyrene or styrene at all. So these trays, this one, oh, it's a little dirty, that's disgusting. I collect them. I've collected thousands of them and washed them in my little East Village kitchen to build giant puppets, and also to build puppets with students in New York City schools to show people what numbers look like.
What's his name again?
He's styrene. Visualize. So the first thing I did on my own. I just stacked the trays and then measured them, and I came to a conclusion that if we stack the trays straight up high in one pile, that in one day, what we use is 8.5 times the height of the Empire State Building.
Wow, that's amazing. That's terrible.
That's terrible. And that's something that everybody can face. So one of the reasons why we really don't want to use this anymore is that there are a lot of reasons. There's a lot of environmental reasons and there's some health reasons. But the big environmental reason is that it makes very bad litter. And it also takes up an enormous amount of space. So in New York City, we have to take all our garbage to landfills as far away as North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Virginia.
And even out here in the oceans, there's like barges that have
barges might
garbage.
They take a lot of
garbage barges.
It's true, and in fact we've been taking a lot of plastics that can't be recycled to China on barges. So we transport, we're using carbon, we're using fuel and producing carbon to carry all sorts of garbage all over the world. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
What is cafeteria culture exactly? Cafeteriaculture.org, I should say.
Well, when I started this journey of becoming obsessed with these amounts of styrofoam trays being used, what I realized was this is in fact not a linear problem. That even if we got rid of all the styrofoam trays, there were still many other issues around that we needed to look at. We have 1.1 million students in New York City schools. Public schools, 1.1 million. That's like a city in itself. So if you imagine that each child is producing a certain amount of waste every day in the cafeteria alone, and you multiply that by 1.1 million, that's an enormous amount of garbage that we produce. So the trays themselves, well, they're made out of these horrible chemicals, and they're thrown into the garbage, and they're transported all over the place. But on the trays, there's a lot of food waste. And food waste is as big a concern because it produces methane when it goes into a landfill. And methane might be more concern than carbon dioxide because when it goes into, it's not meant to go into landfills. It releases methane, which also helps to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Now,
I'm learning so much, I can't believe it.
So there's that. And then there are all these other issues in the cafeteria. Well, why is there so much food waste? Well, we start to look at those issues. And our organization, which started as Styrofoam Out of Schools, we realized the whole culture of the cafeteria needs to be re-examined. Lunch period needs to be re-examined. So this period that in most public schools has been thought of as the least important period of the day, in fact, might be the most important period of the day.
Are children or kids and school kids, are they more responsive and more assertive as to helping out their own environment? Like, are they aware of what's going on?
Well, they are as soon as they know why and they understand. If you go into a school and you just have bins set up and you have signs on every bin that say this goes here, this goes there, and that goes there, okay? So you put your bottles and your cartons in the blue bin, and you put any paper recycling in this bin, and you put trash here. If you start to just include in that signage the why, not just the how.
And the fun.
And make it fun. And suddenly, instead of it saying garbage or trash, it says landfill. This goes to the landfill. Maybe you put a price tag on it. Wow, how much does it actually cost taxpayers to send that one bin of garbage all the way to South Carolina? Suddenly, even a first grader can figure that out.
Okay, so I finally decided to go to the dentist the other day to have a crown replaced that I needed. So I'm a little bit late, like maybe 2 minutes. But I finally get to the dentist office and they make me wait for 30 minutes. I mean, what is that all about? Can't they just call you and tell you that they're running late? I mean, why does everyone have cell phones these days? Just to look good, or just to talk to other people, or have assistants check up on their own personal information? That really bugs me. That really bugs me. And what about this confirmation stuff? They send you an email confirmation so that you can confirm that you're coming. So please confirm with our confirmation that you're coming. And how does it ever end? Where is it going to end? I mean, who finishes the confirmation, for God's sake? I mean, that really bothers me. That really bugs me. So what really bugs you? Write to me and tell me. There must be a million things that bug you, because I know me, there's plenty.